Welcome back to the Daughters of the Moon podcast. We're grateful that you can join us for another week.
We certainly are.
And today we're very excited. We have Terri-Ann Russell with us. Terri-Ann is a quantum activator, violet flame 4.0 creator, healer, and author. She is an intuitive empath healer with abilities in clairsentience and clairaudience. Her first book, From Death to Life, The Incredible True Story of Anthony Joseph, was written just 4 months after the passing of her middle son, Anthony. At his urging from spirit, she started writing and completed and published the book within a year, From Death to Life, The Incredible True Story of Anthony Joseph. He would guide her on a path of healing that would require her to let go of everything that she knew. She shares the heartache and the despair of such a profound loss, and she shows the connection with her son that existed long after his physical death, proving that love never dies. She's currently finishing a series of books. The first one, Reaching for You, a workbook for spiritual transformation with Mother Mary, is a crystalline light series that shares a deep connection with Mary through the transmissions that help you heal your heart and align with your higher self. When she's not writing, she's teaching about opening your spiritual gifts and attending speaking engagements and book signings. So welcome, Terri-Ann. It's really nice to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for all that you two ladies do. I've been watching your show for a while, and it's really, this is the time. There's a lot of people stepping forward into the light and bringing awareness to those that are just waking up.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Well, thank you, because we really enjoy doing this and getting the word out there. And we just felt like there was really a calling, like you say, for people that are, trying to find their path and what is out there and what, paths they could potentially go down. So we find that, being able to have some different people on can enlighten people to maybe, put them down their path that they need to be on.
Absolutely. Give everybody their bliss that they're looking for, because everybody's looking for the lighter way of traveling, right, in this world. And that's what it's all about. Yeah. So your story is very interesting, how you've come to be. Do you want to elaborate a bit more on that?
Sure, absolutely. Anytime I can talk about my son, it brings me pleasure.
Okay.
So we're almost at 5 years since Anthony has transitioned. It was a shock. He was completely healthy. He was 27 years old. We had just been away for a week on vacation. The only thing he had said at that time was he was a little tired. He was working a lot. About 3 weeks later, he got sick. He thought he had a stomach bug. He was misdiagnosed. He went to the emergency room and they misdiagnosed him. I found all this out after, obviously, but that was on a Sunday. He had a fever and he was vomiting. They sent him home, and within a few hours he was dying. His pancreas had become necrotic, wrapped around his spleen, and he actually bled to death.
Wow.
Sorry to hear that.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah, that is a lot. Yeah,
it was a lot to take in, even knowing what I know. I was already in the business. I was working for Sedona Soul Sisters in Sedona, Arizona at the time, and they were really my life preserver. They were I call them my earth angels, because they really helped me through that transition. I don't know, between Anthony's connection and having them, if I would be here today, truly, because it was so painful. I think for me as a healer, what I wasn't expecting was the amount of physical pain that my body went through, having such a deep loss, right? I'm a healer. I work with the body. I work with the emotional body, the spiritual body. But for me, I had never experienced a grief that intense. I had lost my grandparents. They were in their 90s. But never had I known anybody at that point that had lost a child. So I had no navigation of what this was going to look like, what it was going to feel like. And because I am an intuitive empath, a medium, he was there right away. So you're talking within hours, and I've talked to many mediums, and often they don't come through that quickly.
Yeah.
But our arrangement was that he would be there for me in our contract so that I could navigate this journey with him by my side. So for me at that point, I didn't believe he was dead. You know, I didn't want to hear from him. I was like, no, if this is happening, you're dead, and you're not dead. I don't believe that. So that was really difficult for me to sort of feel that and, you know, experience what that was like. It was like my heart was ripped out of my chest. You have children, you know what it would be like if something suddenly happens to them and you have no answers. You know, there's just nothing. They're there one day and they're gone the next. So even knowing what I know did not make it easier for my transition through my process and my journey.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I can totally understand. A close friend of ours, she lost one of her children too at 19. And actually her grandma lost her son too. So we have some experience with not as close as you as such, but you know, in losing someone that you love is never easy. You know, it's a tough one. We, you know, had a time with my son, her brother, we almost lost him. And that was, you know, it stays with you though, forever. That
Yes.
the feeling of almost loss, in your case loss, it still stays with you. It never goes away. So good for you for pulling your socks up and having him with you every minute. Like that's pretty cool too, that he's walking with you and sharing in what you're doing. Beautiful. I love it.
It is a beautiful connection, and that's one of the reasons I didn't want to write the book either. I was like, I'm not a writer. He was a writer. He went to school for communications and journalism, and I didn't know anything about it. So for me, going through the process of writing that book was very cathartic. It's very raw and it's a very emotional book.
I bet.
You feel all the feels that I was feeling at that time, and I was suicidal, and my journey was not easy. And I understand I've had several, as we call the dark night of the souls, throughout my lifetime. This one was the top of the tiers, I can tell you, because I talk about this often, and I like for people to understand. We talk about our frequency, how when we're higher frequency, we create more, we live in a joyful place, a peaceful place, a loving place. When you're down there and grief is really low on the scale of the map of consciousness written by David Hawkins, it's in the book. I share that those darker energies, those darker spirits can sort of then come in and inundate where your space is. So I had a lot of that. I had a lot of experiences, a lot of darkness I was under attack constantly. So it required a lot of personal work from me, myself, to do the energy healing on myself to sort of release what that was.
Right.
And-
So what kind of was the pivotal spot for you then when you were accepting to allow him to come in and start to create this book with him?
Nice question.
Thank you.
Yes, great question. It was about at 4 months. I was struggling. I was not staying here. You know, I had dark thoughts. I would hear, you know, entities or beings telling me what to do. And so I knew I was in trouble, and I knew I needed outside help besides just me. He would come into my energy field. And how I would describe it is, it was almost as if this feeling of lightness and peace would wash over me. Like if I was, you know, screaming and crying, and this peace would wash over me. He would come in, and he would do that very often, almost 3 times a day was necessary for me to be able to raise my frequency enough so that I could get through what I was needing to get through and to face the reality of such a painful experience, right? I didn't want to numb it. Knowing what I know, I'm very holistic, so I didn't want to numb it with anything. I had, you know, doctors and people, you take this, take that. And I didn't want to do any of that. I knew that it was necessary for me as an empath and a healer to feel all the pain that I was feeling. So it was a different experience for me than being a medium, right? You're connecting with spirits who are loved ones of others. And even though I'm an empath and I feel their sadness and their pain, now you're talking about my child, and we have such a connection with our children. For me, it was very difficult to really learn to navigate where I was. Like I always feel like there's a piece of me on earth and there's a piece of me in another dimension all of the time, because we have this connection. And I think it's very natural. A lot of the mothers that I've talked to that have lost children feel the same thing. They don't really necessarily feel like they're fully, completely here because they have someone somewhere else.
Right. Sorry. So was he able then to convey like how his transitioning was, that he was then at peace? Was he able to convey that to you to bring you some sense of comfort? I know it's not immediate comfort because you, like you said, you got to go through all those feels, and I think that that's really important to say that, because I think, yeah, numbing it or those is not, you're just delaying your process, I think, myself.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. It was comforting because I had already started doing past life regressions, stuff like that. I knew about contracts. I didn't want to hear it. We still argue today over the contract and how I say I would have never agreed to that when we were in another time and space, but I know I agreed to it. But think about it, and we laugh now because it's almost 5 years, and obviously the pain has lessened. But when it comes to his birthday, which is in June, and his angel date, which is in July, these times of the year are very difficult for me.
Yeah.
And so I find myself doing more podcasts, writing more, doing more healing with people that have experienced similar experiences. So it did help in a sense because I understood it better. But it didn't really sit well in the beginning with me of how I would have agreed to something so horrific, and he always says that he'll be the mom in the next life. And I was like, well, I'm not coming back.
This is good this time around. So can you talk a little bit about soul contracts? Just explain to people kind of what that is and how we make them, kind of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So soul contracts, I believe, are contracted in another time and place. When we are other energies, our soul energy, and we come together. So say Terri-Ann's coming to Earth now, and my soul is deciding to come to Earth as Terri-Ann. And then I have other beings and elders around me, other ancestors that have been with me before, and we travel together in what we call soul groups. So many of us have had lifetimes and lifetimes together. And there's a purpose for everything and everyone in your soul group. Some are more at a distance, say, don't play so much of an active role in your current life, but they're there. Some may be guides, some maybe your parents or your children. For Anthony and I, it was a very condensed contract that would be necessary for not only his soul evolution, but for my soul evolution. And so that was one of the things that we had contracted. That was important for my soul now to learn through this process of grief, because I had learned doing past life regressions. I've had going through that process when I was being taught, I had past life regressions done on me. So I knew I had had another life where I had taken my own life. So it was very important for me in this life then to have certain things written into my soul contract so that I would make sure, hopefully, that Terri-Ann would be able to work through what that was. Say, like having my Sedona soul sisters with me, having the connection with my son. It was also important that I had a young child. My daughter at the time was only 9. Okay. So I knew that I could not just up and leave. I mean, my older children were older, but she was only 9. And so there was nobody else. So those kinds of things were written into the soul contract, but we still do have free will. So Terri-Ann could have took another path had it been really difficult, like I had learned about before, but I already knew that information. So that information to me sort of helped me navigate the kind of decisions I was making, because we do always have free will.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So was your son also very, was he an empath too? Was he of light spirit as well, like you? Okay, very nice.
He was very advanced from a young age. I was not spiritually awakened. At the time I had my older children.
Right.
So he had said things to me like he chose me to be his mom. I picked you out and I knew you were going to be my mom in this lifetime. And I was like, okay, like you're crazy. So I was not awakened at that time. Going back now, I look at it, and my daughter also said something similar to me. So my daughter was like, we talk about the predecessor of what was to come. You said you had a sick child. My daughter was born sick. I had her at 40. She was the fourth of my 4 children. And she almost died several times. She was in the NICU for over 90 days. She had 4
Wow.
surgeries. She bled internally for 3 years. And
Oh,
that's what led me on my path towards Reiki. And so that experience brought me through to the Reiki so that I could then start to go on my spiritual path.
nice.
So when we look back on it, hindsight, I can see, yes, all of these things led up to this. And she was like the beginning of all of those feelings that I would go through. And then, you know, the ultimate being him leaving. But he was very empathic. He always took on the energies of others. He didn't know how to navigate it. He writes in the book when I channeled him about, he kept a journal. So I had his journal after he passed where he shared a lot of this information that some of it he had shared with me and other things I did not know what an intense feeling it was for him because as a teenager, he just wanted to turn those voices off. He was very intuitive and open, so he would connect very easily. And so going back and reading through this sort of broke my heart all over again because I totally get it. I was exactly the same way, but I didn't have the capability of helping him at that time because I wasn't awake myself.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that's good to recognize that, right? Because we all kind of on our journey get woken when we get woken. So whenever that might be. And it's unfortunate because a lot of times it is something that is more traumatic that
Mhm.
pushes us in that direction to do soul searching, right? And find what we need to bring in that solace for ourselves.
I totally agree. Plus, I think each time we have a trauma that happens in our life, we do a paradigm shift. We shift to another level again of what we need to know, you know, to help us to, you know, share it with other people and also help us to relate to what we're going through in a better way, you know. So, yeah, it's good stuff to know. So,
Yeah, and to bring that experience forward. I always tell people, my clients, this is my experience. When I'm teaching you, you're going to have your own experiences. Like the Mary book, every person has their own experience with Mary. My experience was it took me a year to write the book and another year to acclimate to all of that energy. I had to actually physically, not literally, physically die to be reborn, right? I had to let go of all those beliefs, all of those patterns, all of those thoughts I had about myself. And that was a very painful process for me to go through. So being under the guidance of Mary, even though I was very held in the love that I felt, it was very painful to sort of be brought through that rebirthing process, if you will. You know, you go through an identity crisis, like, who am I really? Everything I've been told about who I was is not true. And you wake up and you go, how is this possible that I've lived in this world for so long and I did not know any of this. So I think the reason that I'm so passionate about what I do and the books that I write is because I want people to understand you're not alone. I felt alone on my journey for a long time. And I want people to understand you're not alone. Everybody goes through their own experiences, what's needed for them, what's based on their contract. And then you have the free will to make those choices if you so choose to go forward with what it is that your purpose is.
Yeah. So when you were kind of shedding everything, it was like really like just stripping away all the layers and just like there must have been a lot, like you said, it was a really hard time. It must have been really a raw time for you with a lot of emotions and stuff. So how did you get through that? Was that like through community with your Sedona Soul Sisters, or was that through journaling, or how did you get through that?
So it was very interesting. We had been guided by my son to sell everything we own, our business and everything, and buy an RV and travel during COVID. Um, I never thought my husband would do it. um, I brought it up to him one night and I said, Anthony asked that, he's guiding me to sell everything, sell our business, buy an RV and go on the road. So I was already homeschooling my daughter because of COVID. We had no reason to not go. And what I found through that process of letting go of all of that stuff, leaving Sedona and then being on the road, it was very freeing for me. It was also very healing for me to be with the earth and ground myself. And then Mary brought through these transmissions that would also bring in new energies to me, right? First, I had to clear away what it was that was holding me back. And I would not have been able to do that had I stayed where we were. I was still that was about 2 years after he had passed. So I was still very much going through this grieving process. I don't feel like it ever goes away fully. But she was there to sort of strip away all of those ideas and beliefs that I had that I held for so long. And being on the road gave us the capability for me to be in that freeing space, to be with the earth, to be able to ground, and to have some fun, sort of navigate the grief journey while also navigating raising a young child. So having some joy in my life while also grieving. It was a very, like a dance. You'd have waves, they come and they go. And I say that grief is always here, right? It comes and goes, but it yet always remains. It's always within me, whatever we do. But I do have periods where I have beautiful joy. My daughter's 14 now, just entering high school. And, our experiences shape who we are. So everything that's brought me through now, writing the second book, I'm just finishing the next book to Anthony's book, which is Life After Death, which is about the past life regressions that I've done that talk about the in-between life, that give more of a perspective of a subconscious, so the soul, what goes on really behind the scenes that we really can't see. Because I think a lot of people think about the afterlife, but it's really not talked about as much as it should be.
I agree.
And so did Anthony share with you and Mary share with you about what it is like to pass and, what your soul goes through when you do that passing?
Nice.
Yes. Yeah. So for me, Anthony's passing, it was just, so because he wasn't sick long, like my dad just passed of cancer recently. So my dad was sick a long time. Anthony's was very sudden. And sometimes when it's very sudden, the personality of the soul is not really aware of what's going on. From what he shared with me is he was 27. He never thought, he thought he was sick. He thought he had a stomach bug. He never thought that he would die. And so even after he passed, he would say he was talking to his roommate was with him when he passed in the ambulance. The paramedics were there. I'm not dead. I'm right here. I'm not dead. So his personality aspect of himself was not aware. He was out of his body before the pain set in. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, which is
So for
nice
him,
for you to know that too, though, right? Is that he wasn't in pain.
Yeah.
he wasn't in pain and he wasn't alone. So with my dad recently, I had got the experience to be with my dad when he passed. I was there. I saw him take his last breath. I didn't understand that it would be so peaceful because everything I read scared me how it would be for somebody to pass. And I knew that wasn't true because Anthony had shared with me that it's not. It's uncomfortable. What my guides have shared and what he has shared is it's uncomfortable. It's like when you're being birthed, right?
Mhm.
You're giving birth or you're coming in now as a human, and it's uncomfortable the way that it feels, but it's not painful. They don't suffer. What we say is time isn't really a lot of time for them when they're passing. So even though my dad was sick for a long time, I got to see my dad and experience him being in and out of his body as his body was preparing to die. But his soul, he was still there with all of us. And it was a beautiful transition to be able then to see that and to understand that on a deeper level compared to like with my son and not knowing any of that previously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally.
And I think it's great that you got to experience that with your dad, because I think that's, something that you'll hold on to for a long time. And I'm sure he comes through and probably guides you as well, and gives you some knowledge, but that piece to know and just experience that, I think, is beautiful.
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, my dad's energy is very different than Anthony's. Anthony likes to talk. Anthony was a people person. He lived in Flagstaff, Arizona, where he went to college, and he knew everybody. So he comes in from the beginning. He was very chatty, right? My dad is not like that. So my dad's energy is very reserved. He's more of an observer. He's quiet. He didn't come in right away because he had his own healing and stuff to do, but I could feel his presence in my parents' house. Even today, he likes to, I always share that each person has their own gifts and abilities in the afterlife. So my dad likes to play with electronics. And so I don't know if it's affecting your lights there, but I've seen your lights flicker. That's how my dad communicates a lot of times, to show me or show my mother that he's there. It'll be like with her phone will come on and start playing one of their songs. No rhyme or reason, it's just sitting there and it comes on in the house. Or my husband and I were sleeping there soon after in my parents' bed, and the closet light came right on, and my husband's like, I think your dad's here.
That's nice. He's
So yeah, and I think it's cool that, I can experience that and share that with my mom to help ease some of that pain that she feels, because they were married, gosh, for 55 years.
wow.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
it's so beautiful when somebody that has passed comes through like that with something. When my uncle passed, I remember I had gone back, and I was laying down, and mom was, patting my hair because I was upset. And then when I woke up, I said to her, "Oh, it was so nice." I said, "When Uncle Barry was, I could hear his laughter coming through the window with the breeze." And she said, "Well, I shut the window. So, that was just him coming through." And then I remember my brother was upset because he hadn't come, and him and my brother were really close. And then the phone rang, and he picked up the phone, and it was dead air. And so then he knew that was his message, right? And it was like, okay, he's just got to make his way around people. And
Mhm.
he was also very
People person.
people person. And so when we had kind of his celebration of life, he came in as a butterfly and went and touched everybody's head, sat on
Wow.
the wall for a few minutes, and then flew off. So I love to hear these stories about when people pass and how they come back to see us, because I think it's just beautiful and comforting for people to know that there is that out there.
It's true. My husband passed, and now I get dimes. It seems like they drop out of heaven. That all of a sudden, if I got something bothering me, and all of a sudden I'll go, oh shit, there's another dime, and I'll go, okay, got it, and he does it all the time. And it's even more so this last while. So I guess he's directing me in a different direction because we're going in a different direction too, right? So yeah, it's very cool for everything that the spirit world gives us to let us know that they're still in touch with us and care about us, same thing, my brother, her uncle who passed, songs come and everything else. He was just a beautiful person too. His personality was just big.
Yeah.
And he comes back big. Yeah.
And he comes back big. I think that's what's important for people to understand too. They don't change. Their
Yeah.
personality still exists. When I talk to people, I sort of try to separate with the personality and the soul so people don't get too confused, because the soul is a piece of your personality, but it's not the whole part of your personality as a piece of the soul.
Yes.
So when they come back, and that's when you share, right? Oh, they're larger than life, and they're here, and they're loud, or they're obnoxious, or whatever it is. It's because that's exactly the way they are still.
Yeah.
And I think the second book of Anthony's with me is sharing that from the beyond, the in between, I call it. It's called A Glimpse of Heaven, Life After Death, because they're sharing how it is for them now that they've passed, right? What they can do, how everybody has their own experiences, if you will, or what they're working on, or the stages of, ascension for them and what they go through now that they're a soul on the other side. So it doesn't end just because you're not that person anymore. And I think people sometimes, I know I felt like it's just such a loss. But if you understand that they're always there, like, it gives me great comfort to know that I am divinely protected, right? I know that my son, whatever he tells me, wherever he guides me, I'll do it because I understand that this is all part of what it is in the bigger perspective that he can see that I can't always see.
That's true. Yeah.
Absolutely. So do you think that when we're open to it, to our loved ones that have passed, do you think they do give us signs and symbols that do guide us into different paths, whether we're ready or not? I mean, I know we have free will, so I know we have that choice whether to take that road or not, but do you think that they do put these, I don't want to say stumbling blocks, but like obstacles or a push in the right direction, rather that's, losing a job or losing something, to be able to move in those directions?
Yeah, I think often as humans, what we view as a challenge or an obstacle is not really a challenge or an obstacle. It's meant to push us in another direction. Wherever I was going with the direction of what I was doing at the time in Sedona, I was now meant to leave Sedona, and I was meant to go in another direction, and I was meant to become a writer. Would I have done any of that had I not had that experience? I doubt it. That's not the path I was going. I was, very happy and comfortable being a healer in Sedona, Arizona. And they sort of like push you out of the nest, right? It's time for you now to expand and grow. So I think as we change our perspective about whatever challenge or obstacle we face, say it's divorce, a lot of people have a negative connotation about divorce. They feel, I know I did, I felt like a failure. I failed my family, and you have this negative view about what it is. But really, when I look back on it now, it's like that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me, because I would not have been able to grow into who I was had I stayed where I was. So it can be still very uncomfortable for me when they guide me to do something or show me, because I'm very open to it. So people who maybe are not as open, but you will get signs. You will see. So suddenly, oh, I want to move to Texas. Like, what is this draw I have with Texas, right? So you're looking at it, or just maybe a thought pops in and you're like, I need a change in my life. I feel like my life is stagnant. I need to do something different. So that's your guides pushing you gently towards where you're supposed to be and go. For me, I don't learn very easily, so it's usually a big push off the cliff.
We've all had those. We've all had those where you go, spirit, okay, I'm not getting this little subtle messages. Can you give me the kick in the butt? You know, let me see it because I'm not paying attention. But I think that comes with just every day. What we do every day, we forget to pay attention because we're so connected to what's happening at the right now. So it's nice to know that, nice you saying that to people, like, take the minute, you know, go there, find out. You know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know, right? We raise our granddaughter, and it's quite funny because recently she just graduated high school and she's a little unsure of where she wants to go in life. And she said to me, she said, I've been having deja vus like crazy. And I said, well, those are check-in spots. Those are just to know that you're going down the path that you made. Basically, your soul made this path to, and you're just checking in. She says, like, I knew we were doing home rentals before we were even doing them. And I said, that's great. That's, you're opening up, like, pay attention to these things because you're getting, these are messages and being open to the spirit world, right? And so I think it's interesting how in such a tumultuous time for her, because she has no idea what to do now, she's getting these messages, whether she believes them or not.
Yeah, she's a teenager, so but she's been around us lots, so I think she sort of says sometimes go, whatever. You know?
Right. I think it's beautiful that she's aware and you've shared that with her.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I know my grandmothers were Italian, very intuitive. We didn't talk about that kind of stuff, right? They knew things. You're having a boy, you're having a girl. They sort of knew these things, but we didn't talk about them as much as it's talked about. So I try to talk with my daughter also, just around not only the messages you get, but the feelings. I mean, pay attention to those feelings you get about somebody. Because when I was raised in the 70s, it was very much about respect. So you didn't disrespect anybody, even if you maybe had a bad sense about them, or you saw something and it came to fruition after you told somebody something, but they didn't believe you. Now where it's more aware, and people, children especially, that's why I wrote the children's book for grief, because I wanted children, parents to be able to share with children. It's called Someone I Love Lives in Heaven. And it shares about, for children, what they go through in loss and how they can see the signs. Like, so if it is the butterfly or it is the dime or whatever you like doing with your loved one, they still do with you.
Yeah.
Like I told my boys and my daughters, even though you may not be able to hear them, they can hear you. So if you're feeling alone, if you're feeling scared, reach out to your brother, reach out to your grandfather, because they can hear you and they will come in, and you'll feel a difference when you start to be cognizant of what that feeling is. I always say, whether it's good or bad, right? If you're in a situation, you're at a store with a lot of people and sort of your personality is happy and bubbly and all of a sudden it drops, pay attention to that, because obviously you're picking up on energy and it's not yours, or you're picking up on something else that's there. Or it could be somebody that you just met, right? So pay attention to what those feelings you get.
Yeah.
And if it's good feelings too, pay attention. If you get goosebumps, like often I know I'm on the right path when I'll get full body chills. It'll come in and it's just like, and how I explain is I'm not trying to do anything. Like say if it was a move, we were moving out of Sedona. I'm not trying to make this happen. It just sort of all of a sudden full body chills. Okay, I know that now that I'm going on the right path, right? Like you said with your granddaughter.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think even for us, like it was funny with the home rentals because we were like, okay, we need a roof. That's how this all started, was like, we need a roof. So we got to get that. And so then it kind of just went from there. It was like, well, why don't we, do this and do that? And it's kind of added and it's shifted and moved in different directions. But I really felt as this has all kind of been transpiring for us, it's really a push for me about making this home my own, but also it's a push because I feel like I'm being pushed in a new direction.
Yeah.
And that I needed these physical, I can see changes to move me forward. So
Yeah.
I just find it's interesting the way that spirit sometimes works to push you
Yeah.
where they want you to go.
Yeah, I agree, because I think spirit sees newness all the time. Newness, grab it, take it, experience it. And yeah, you're right. You got all that newness coming and it's saying, yeah, there's more to come yet. So get excited.
I think that's the biggest thing, to get excited and to be in joy. When you get excited about what's to come rather than fear of everything that could go wrong, there's a different feeling to what's going to occur, right? Our reality is created by our thoughts. So if we are fearing something or we're doubtful about something, often that's times that's exactly what's going to happen to you. And getting rid of things, I mean, that's perfect for clearing out that old space. I tell my clients all the time, get rid of stuff, because stuff, and especially if it's like old relationships and you've kept pictures, and a lot of my clients hold on to things, that stagnant energy is just in your space. So you'll find me, I move a lot. I probably drive my husband crazy, because I'm like, oh, we're going to be here for a year, and we're here for 3 years, or then we're going to be here for 3 years, and now we're only here for a year. It's time to move. I've outgrown this energy. It's time to go.
Kim and her brother grew up like that too. Because I just would say to them all of a sudden, yeah, here we go, we're moving here. And they go, oh, Mom, yeah, that's okay, you'll get over it. And they did. But I mean, everything was telling me, you needed to experience this, Barb, you need to experience this, I need to do this, I need to do that. And the kids will learn too as you move and do new things, right? Plus you see so many people, or at least I do, that are stuck and they can't move, and it doesn't matter how much you say to them, like you should try, or it seems like you're kind of stuck, well, they'll argue with you up and down that they're not, of course, sort of thing, because they have no intention of moving out of their comfort zone of where they're at. What I wanted to mention was, I was sort of in a time where Kimmy had given me a bunch of different things, and I said to her, like, I want to change things around, but I don't know what to do with all this stuff. And she says to me, Mom, take some pictures and just get rid of them, and take some pictures, and you'll always be able to go back and look at the pictures. Well, since I've taken the pictures, I've gone back and looked, but not near as much as I thought I would do if, getting rid of them where I'd miss them. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
It is good to clear.
It is good to clear, and that it's funny because my husband and I had that discussion, because he's like, now we painted all the walls, like about the pictures, and I said, no, I intend to bring every picture in individually, because I've moved most of it out because I'm doing so much. And so I said, I intend to bring them in individually, look around, see if I actually feel like that picture belongs in my house anymore. Everything is going to be intention. I said, everything that comes back into this house is coming in with an intention. If I get it in here and I'm like, you know what? No, that doesn't serve me anymore, it's gone. Because I agree with you. I think clutter and just keeping things to keep things is not good for our energy at all.
Right. Or like your mom said, you've outgrown the space now, or those pictures no longer resonate with who you are becoming, or where you're going. And so I think that's important for people to know also. It's like, we're not always going to stay on this same path. I'm definitely not going to stay on the same path of living in the same house for 30 years. I mean, I raised my boys in Hackettstown, New Jersey, where the M&Ms are made.
Yeah.
I lived there for 20 years with my ex-husband. Stagnant, unhappy, but I had everything on the outside. That's what it looked like, right? On the outside, it looked like it was a perfect, happy family, and I was happy being there. But I wasn't. I was stagnant. I was struggling with this vision of what it was supposed to be like, because that's what my parents had. That's what my grandparents had. And so when you look at me and I'm all over the place, like my father says, fly by the seat of your pants is what he tells me. It really is just guidance. Like I tell my husband, it's really, I'm being guided to do something. It's not like I'm just saying, oh, well, I'm tired of this space, I want to move. I've outgrown this space. I'm stagnant now. Either I did what I was supposed to do while I was there, it was an experience I needed to have, people I needed to help, it was time for me then to move on. And sometimes it is very painful to move on and to leave those spaces, but it's necessary.
Absolutely. And that's great that you have a husband that supports you that way, right? Because it's always nice when we have that partner that supports us rather they understand it or not.
Yeah, that's the truth.
He just says, here we go again, you know, are we moving again? We just moved last year. So when we came back from our RV trip, we were on the road for a year. We lived and we traveled. We were guided back, and we couldn't go to Sedona because there was no housing. We couldn't afford to live there. I was working. He couldn't get a job there. So we had to move to Phoenix. And I did not want to move to Phoenix. So I fought it, and it got harder and harder and harder because I wasn't listening to the guidance that I was receiving. This is where you need to be, but you don't want to be there, you know? So I think that's part of that free will aspect that we have, right? When I talk to my clients about contracts, there's things that are strictly contracted, like a parent or a child or a spouse. Sometimes where you're going to live, your purpose. That there's other things that are more flexible. And so if you sort of fight that and dig your heels in, which is what I used to do, because I didn't want to do it, like I have free will, I don't want to do that. I found that the road was a little bit more difficult and long had I just given in and surrendered to what I was being shown or given, because then I was like, okay, it was much more freeing to be in that frequency of surrender rather than pushing in and no, this is what I want, but they know better because they have that bigger picture.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you had one final thought to leave with everybody, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. Our journey really is just this unfoldment process. We come here to learn, we come here to grow, and we come here to evolve. And when you think about it in that aspect, rather than things are being done to you or you've had a hard life, shifting that perspective is everything. So a shift in perspective, learn how to shift your perspective. It changes your world. The more that your inner place, your inner sanctum, your inner center is peaceful and loving, the more that your outer world is peaceful and loving.
That's true. That's very true.
Yeah,
Very
very
nice.
nice. Yes, very well
Very
said.
nice.
And can you tell everybody where to find you?
Yes, you can find me at terri-annrussell.as.me. That is my website. All of my books are on Amazon. If you look up Terri-Ann Russell, it'll pop up with all of my books. Anthony's next book, and I call them Anthony's books because they really are channeled with him. And even though the second one is the past life regressions, he's in there. That'll be out July. I should have it finished. It's almost complete.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Let us know when it's going to be
Thank-
complete and you're being published. We can always put it on our site too for you.
Awesome. That'd be
Awesome.
great. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you for all that you do and having me today. And what
Well,
you're
thank
doing is
you.
so important.
Thank
well,
you for joining us
and thank you
too.
for joining us. It was a beautiful conversation, and I think it's going to give a lot of people hope that, you know, you can connect with your loved ones just by connecting with them and, you know, listening to their messages and those kind of things. So we both really appreciate that. And, you know, of how, you know, even though you're going through grief, there is sort of that light on the other side. So we really appreciate you sharing that message with everyone.
So thank you. Yes,
Thank
thank you.
Yes.
Please come back.
Thank you.
Yes. We'd love to have you back. And
Oh,
everybody
thank
else,
you.
we will see you next time.
You bet you will.